Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on your time zone. My name is Jonathan Schoonover, and I am the Senior Vice President of Strategic Practice with Tennesseans for Quality Early Education. And you have tuned in to another Bright Start Tennessee Network Lunch and Learn. Today, we're going to be diving in to explore this new grant opportunity from the Department of Human Services on childcare. And this is a great opportunity to look at partnerships between employers and nonprofit teams. So just as a reminder, Tennesseans for Quality Early Education, we serve as a nonpartisan coalition of advocates for Tennessee's youngest learners. And our mission really is to seek state policies and practices that ensure that all Tennessee children from birth all the way through third grade get the high quality care and education that they need to power our state's future. And with that said, we have really focused on creating the Bright Start Tennessee Network as a means to be a statewide network of community partnerships that's really focused on closing those achievement and opportunity gaps for children from birth through third grade. We are continuing to grow across the state, and now we're covering about 60% of the population of Tennessee. We had our sixth inaugural cohort members, backbone organizations across the state, and we've added two more, and we're continuing to look to expand through 2024 as well. So excited to kind of see that grow. For those of you that are on this is something that you'll hit every time, and we'll just keep beating this into you. But this idea of to get to third grade reading and math proficiency, it really takes these three domains all functioning at their peak. So high quality birth through age 8, learning environments, physical health, mental health, and development all being on track beginning at birth, and then having supported and supportive communities and families. And with that said, we have 15 measures of success, 5 for each of those that we track, that we provide data for, that we continue to kind of look at to make sure that they're functioning well. And that's kind of an overview as a whole as to who we are at Bright Start. As I kind of turn that screen sharing off, I'm going to highlight a couple different folks here that are going to be our guest speakers. So I'm going to turn this conversation, which I do hope that really will function as a conversation today, with Blair Taylor, our CEO, and then with Dana Glenn, who covers licensing for Department of Human Services. So with that said, I'm going to now turn it over to Blair. I'm going to spotlight you, and then I'm going to spotlight Dana as well.
Well, hello. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on which side of the state you're on. Great to see everybody. I am Blair Taylor, and I'm the CEO of Tennesseans for Quality Early Education. Thanks, Jonathan, for kicking us off. Jonathan is en route. He's pulled over on the side of the highway somewhere in Tennessee to play host to this. So that's why he was coming to us with no screen. He's on his way to a First 8 Memphis Leadership Council meeting, and Jonathan lives in Knoxville, so he's got a ways to go to get there. So I want to welcome Dana Glenn here. So thrilled to have her joining us today to talk about this really exciting topic. Dana is the Director of Licensing for DHS, and she spends a lot of her time, and I'll let her introduce herself in a minute, but she spends a lot of her time really nurturing and cultivating sort of business engagement in supporting employee child care and encouraging them to be innovative and sharing practices. And so she's going to be talking to us today. The topic of our Lunch and Learn today is this exciting new grant opportunity that DHS has created and made available to nonprofits and their employer partners. So the purpose of what we're going to do today, she's going to tell us about that, help us understand more about what that is. We want to make this conversational. And so please, as we're talking, if you have questions, thoughts, put them in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that and shooting them over to Dana while she's talking. And we'll certainly also leave some time at the end, but we do expect it to be conversational and want to answer all your questions. And in addition to just telling us about the grant, we're going to pick her brain a little bit too about some of the types of creative partnerships that she's seen in Tennessee and some of the ideas that may be able to be kind of idea generators for you and your team members in your parts of our state, and what kind of ideas might you bring to this grant opportunity. So with that, Dana, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Blair. Thank y'all for having me. My name is Dana Glenn. I'm the Director of Licensing for the Department of Human Services. I joined the department almost 3 years ago. This June, I came to the department from a career in economic and community development. As Blair said, I work really closely with employers. I work really closely on employer-sponsored childcare. I do a lot of work with communities to create strategies that are specific to their community. All of us on this call know childcare is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What works in Mountain City is not going to work in Memphis. So looking at that, and that is one of the joys of my job, is getting to work with communities. I oversee our licensure team. So our field operations team is led by Glenna Jones, and then our pre-licensure unit is led by Cynthia Roberts. So they do a really good job of running those programs, which allows me to be out on the road and taking these outreach opportunities.
That's awesome. And Dana, just so you and everybody knows, I just put in the chat a link to the DHS webpage that has information, kind of the announcement about this grant opportunity that we're going to be talking about today, called the new grant opportunity. And then, so you'll have that for reference. And there's also a link on there to the actual grant application guidance materials. I think that's probably everything they'd need if they wanted to, but I just want everybody to know that's in the chat if you want to pull it up on your desktop while Dana's going through her work. So Dana, shall we just start with that? This is an exciting new opportunity. You guys have put some resources to this. Tell us about the grant, and what are the parameters of the grant? Who should be applying? Those kinds of things.
Sure. So this grant was the outcome of, I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I give you all the right numbers. House Bill 0634 with Representative Moody and Senate Bill 543 with Senator Jackson. So they did this. This was regular session of 2023. So this time last year. And they specifically wanted this grant to support nonprofit childcare agencies. So we get a lot of questions of, why nonprofits? They selected that, and we're really grateful for the state dollars. So it's a pilot, it's a 3-year pilot, $15 million a year for 3 years, so $45 million total, and the money can roll over. So that's always a positive thing with grants. It's not, you don't spend it or you lose it. So that is kind of the background of where this grant came from.
Yeah, that's I just wanted to mention something about that too. Yeah, so that was really, thank you for bringing that up. That was the Child Care Improvement Fund, sort of what they called that $45 million. And I do want to flag that you all have also done some other creative grant making through the use of those funds with the Shared Services Hub grant. And I know that kind of happened last year, and there's some recipients of that. But so you're using that same pool of funds for this grant. So terrific.
Yes, we are so excited about state dollars because, as y'all know, federal dollars are so specific. So, you are told exactly how you can spend them, what you can do with them, and they don't allow for construction. But state dollars are wide open and they allow for construction. They can support operations. It's really, really exciting to see what's going to come from this. And it's a pilot, so we've all got our fingers crossed on what that would look like when the 3-year term is up. As for the
go proceed. Thank you.
So the parameters are, this has to be an employer-sponsored, an employer partner, partnering with a nonprofit that is going to operate childcare. So we don't have the ability to do the pass-through, so it couldn't be us, for example, giving the money to a United Way and then that being sub-granted out. It is going to go directly to a nonprofit childcare agency that is partnering with an employer. And the employer, there aren't parameters on that, right? So it could be a nonprofit employer, it can be private industry, it can be local government. So there are all sorts of ways. The employer piece of that, whoever the employer is wide open. Just the childcare provider has to be a nonprofit, and it doesn't have to be an existing agency. So say they have 3 agencies that are running really well and they want in on this. They can start a 4th agency that's a nonprofit. We have people, who are looking at how do we get into the nonprofit space. It can be a brand new agency that doesn't have any other agencies around, just brand new nonprofit. So that's very flexible.
Fantastic. And what about the term of the grant? Is there a set length of time? Is there, and also like an up to amount?
So on the term of the grant, you are going to want, the applicant is going to want to put if it's going to be a 1-year term or a 2-year term. So we don't have any flexibility beyond paying out over 2 years. So just definitely include that in the application, and there is no cap. So in the conversations that I've been having, and I will back up a little bit. I was not involved in the creation of this grant. I did research for companies that applied for the grant, applied for similar grants in other states, and talked to them about what they liked and what they didn't like. And then so the reason I was communities, so I can't be on both sides of it. So I'm glad to be able to support applications, or not support applications, but support folks who are going through the grant. So one of the ways I've been encouraging people to just put the kitchen sink on the application.
That's awesome. And Dana, it looks like you may be having a little internet instability on
Give me
your end. We
one
can hear
second.
you. Yeah, you're frozen.
Uh-oh, probably not an attractive
But
face.
we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just gonna turn my camera off and that might help. Give it a little
Okay.
break. Is that better?
We can hear you great.
Okay, perfect.
And Dana, while we're kind of at a pause moment here, there's a question in the chat. Connie Casha is asking, what about public universities who have a nonprofit status as well as being an employer? Could they be an applicant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. So, Dana, are there, kind of employer partnerships that you've seen that you said you did some research, you didn't design this grant, but you've done research in other parts of the state. You've maybe also seen some example of partnerships here in our state. Are there any you want to kind of highlight just for inspo here?
I am so sorry. I am going to switch over to my hotspot. I am not sure what's happening.
It's happened to all of us, heaven knows. We're all used to that little pop-up dialogue box that says your internet is unstable.
Yeah, I don't know what I've done to upset it today. Okay.
And the good news is we can still hear your voice.
Okay, good deal. I'm gonna switch over really quickly before it kicks me off again.
Okay, sounds good. One of the things I was excited about while Dana's doing that, every year the governor hosts sort of an annual economic development summit. And this past year it was in Chattanooga, held in Chattanooga. It's a big deal where a lot of economic development and chambers of commerce types of folks come. And it was the first time ever where there was an actual panel dedicated to childcare and childcare partnerships with employers. And Dana was was kind of one of the guest speakers on that panel. And she had two Tennessee employers who actually one chamber of commerce and one employer who had who were speaking about the work that they'd done with Department of Human Services and the support that they'd gotten and how they were investing in employee childcare, which was super, super cool. Dana, are you there?
I'm back. Can y'all hear me?
Back.
Whoa,
I was just
okay.
talking about the panel. Did you hear the panel at the Economic Development Forum? I would say the first time ever, I was so excited there was an actual panel on childcare. You hosted it. And you had a couple of employer on the panel with you, and you were highlighting them as examples. So just kind of back to you on examples of things that you've seen that could give some inspiration to this crowd of folks on the kind of partnerships they could employ.
Sure. So we have our classic Tyson model. I'm sure y'all are familiar with. It's the, partnership with an employer. Tyson built a building. KinderCare came and operated the child care agency. So we're seeing a lot of interest in that. Something I'm seeing a lot of now is nonprofits that provide services, providing childcare as a wraparound. So we have Olive Tree in Knoxville. And then we also have Renewal House in Davidson County, who they made a big announcement recently that they will be offering childcare to the women who are in treatment. If you're not familiar with Renewal House, it is a program in Davidson County where women who are in treatment for addiction can recover and they can have their children with them while they're in recovery. It's an incredible program and it makes a lot of sense to have that childcare on site. to help those women out. So that's the trend we're seeing. I've seen some interest in co-working spaces. Sorry, words are hard this morning. In some co-working spaces. So looking at what childcare could look like in a co-working space, kind of that micro center model, if we could spread those out, I would love to see one of those come to fruition. I think that's so cool. We're seeing all sorts of things. People are getting really, really creative. We have the industrial park project in Clarksville. Obviously, that one's been big and splashy and really cool.
Talk about it though. Say how that worked. I'm not sure everybody on the call would have heard about it.
Sure. So there's an
great
industrial
idea.
park. Yeah, it's incredible. There was a piece of property in the industrial park in Clarksville that wasn't zoned for industrial, and it wasn't necessarily like the best use for, it wasn't great land for industrial use, but it was great for commercial use. So they gave a piece of property and a tax abatement to a childcare provider. There was an RFP process, and the RFP process was that it wasn't construction company and childcare provider. It was the childcare provider will fill out an RFP and talk about how they can bring childcare to this space. So they selected a childcare agency. It's going to be 800 slots of capacity on site in the industrial park, and they're going to offer discounts for employers of the industrial park and active military because they're so close to the base. And so that is, I mean, that's awesome. And we've seen a lot of people look at how they can do that. I would say
super creative. We hear a lot about these like multiple, like for the big Tysons of the world, like big companies, it's arguably easier to sort of do on-site childcare, and you have, you know, captive audience, if it were a captive market there, and perhaps greater resources. But for smaller and medium-sized businesses where they might want to come together, that's a great example. And of course, you mentioned WeWork. Have you seen any other examples of smaller and medium-sized businesses coming together for like a shared childcare situation?
yes. Had to think through that a little bit. Yes, we've seen that in some communities. They're looking at, you know, obviously it's very expensive and that's not an easy lift. So they're looking at how do we kind of pull our resources. And Greg Lowe, who was on the panel from Marshall County that you were referencing, Blair, he actually works for state ECD now, which is fabulous because he's been spreading the childcare gospel to all of his communities. But one of the projects that he worked on was trying to figure out how they could get all the employers at their industrial park to contribute. So some people were saying like, hey, we will handle janitorial services. We will handle this. We can't financially support it like on paper with a check, but we can provide benefits, which is, as we all know, that's an incredible benefit. So really kind of talking through that with people and helping them understand those small things that they're like, oh, we can only do this. Like, can you imagine I worked in childcare, having someone who did janitorial services for our agency would have been incredible because I did janitorial services for my mom's agency. So like, you just think of all those different pieces of, they don't feel like it's a lot, but it's a huge, huge help. So we talk through that a lot, and we talk about that's a benefit. And also like, what benefits are you providing that you don't realize you're providing? So.
Absolutely. Let me pause here. There's more. There's a lot more to say and talk about that Dana and I will do. But if there's, let me just pause and see. Would anybody like to make a comment, ask a question? Anybody?
Hi, Blair. This is Lori from the YMCA in Knoxville.
Hey, Lori.
We actually have a micro center that we have opened in partnership with Knox County Schools. And we are looking at the potential of opening a few other micro centers, not only with Knox County Schools, but also with a local healthcare agency. And we're looking at the new CARE grant and wondering, should we submit an application for each employer that we're working with and / center, or should we do one application encompassing all projects?
That is a really good question, and I am going to take that back. But my initial thought is you are limited on how much you can put in an application. So it may make more sense to build a stronger case to do multiple applications, as much like work as that is. Like, you've only got 8 pages. So I'm thinking if you wanted to build a stronger case, to me, it would be, let's do separate applications. But let me go back on that one and I'll get you a full answer. Lori, do you have my contact information?
I do. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind, just send me, and I may have your email too. Just if you'll just shoot me an email, you don't have to put details or anything. That way I can just make sure I follow up with you on that.
I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. That'd be awesome.
Terrific. Anybody else got any questions specific
And
to their
that's
situation?
something too. I'll just jump in real quick. And Dana, when we get answers, loop us in on the answers for that. And we're happy to send that back out to everybody on the call as well, so that we can make sure that everybody gets kind of information, as much information as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll make sure it's added to the FAQ too. So if that is not on our website this morning, it should be up early next week.
So Dana, an employer is an employer, and it can be a nonprofit. To Connie's question, could be a public university. It could be, obviously a for-profit employer, which tend to be, what we think of as the business community. But maybe could be a school.
Absolutely.
Could be a school district or a charter school or a private school or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It can, that is wide open what an employer looks like.
Got it. And the kinds of things that, as we think about grants and we think about putting together the budgets in a grant, and what are the costs that we would be asking, to be funded? What are the types of costs that you could see, be qualifying to be covered?
I would say construction costs for sure. I really encourage people to take advantage of that piece because that is something that's so rare for us to be able to cover that. I would highly recommend, construction is a big piece of that. There are some abilities for retention bonuses with this grant. I'm going to pull up my little PDF to make sure that I'm not leaving anything out. Because it's still a new grant for me too. But when I've been talking to folks too, and that's something, so it's very specific in there. I cannot help with an application and I cannot critique your draft. But if you want to talk through, or you want to bring an employer and you guys want to talk through what you're considering applying for, one of the things I can do is tell you what's covered by other grants that we have. With one of the employers I'm working with, they wanted a lot of furniture, but establishment grant can cover furniture. So don't waste your ask on things that your other grants are going to cover.
That's a great point. You're talking about, there are obviously a lot of resources available through the Department of Human Services. You're saying make sure, ideally tap those. And
Yes.
there's establishment grants. So if it's a new center, the establishment grants are what? $1,000 a slot for supplies and equipment. And there's a
Yeah.
separate application for that. But any provider, is it a childcare provider, can apply for that?
Yes. The only requirement is that they go through pre-licensure and they accept the certificate program.
Okay, that's great. And then obviously, if it's an employer, we would hope that the employer is aware of and helps their employees to be aware of the child care certificate program, so that those employees who may be the beneficiary of this child care facility or initiative are also tapping those dollars. And I know you do a lot. You've been out to employers' sites, you've talked to them, you've held, brown bag lunch or little information sessions for their employees about here's how you apply, here's how, here's the resource and the benefit, the payment assistance that could be available to you. You want to speak about that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are able to do on-site eligibility fairs. We did one, Tyson's kind of the big splashy one we did. And that was awesome because we were just able to set up on site. They gave us a lot of different spaces so that we could have privacy when interacting with folks. They provided all the HR documents we would need for each of the people that were applying. And they were very specific with their employees up front. This is what you have to bring. If you do not bring this to your session, this is not going to be worth your time. So everyone came and they were prepared. They had their documentation and we were able to look at their eligibility on site and give them an idea of what they would qualify for. And then go ahead and process that application in the typical process. And
That's huge. That's a great service.
Yes. And we've done some work with FedEx. They're not ready for employer sponsored childcare, but we've talked to FedEx employees about, hey, here's this, apply for this, because accessibility is something we're working really, really hard on, but affordability, that's there. So, we're always
to a point, up to a certain 85% of state median income.
Yes. Yes.
How do you handle that, like on site, if there are employees who don't qualify? How do you handle an information session if their employees kind of over that 85% threshold?
So they would be responsible for inviting folks to the information session, so they can kind of call their list off the bat and know, okay, we're not going to invite our executives, obviously, because they probably make over this, like the single parent with one child is, I think, 53,000. So they're specific on their guest list, but Tyson kind of handled that with their employees, worked with them to set up. We weren't saying like, hey, let's check your payroll and see who qualifies. We were saying, you provide this information and we'll be there for the people that show up.
So
And if
that's
they don't
great.
qualify, they don't qualify. And Tyson was awesome because they subsidize a portion of care regardless of your salary. So they just looked at, they wanted our subsidy to come first and then their subsidy, which is
Sure.
great.
Of course, that's awesome. And yeah, I'm excited about that, that you guys can get out there and work so closely with employers. And and we hear a lot, and I know folks on the call here are familiar with, sometimes it's, I suppose, just the application process for the certificate. Sometimes that can be a hurdle for people, and sometimes they need, folks need supports, navigators to kind of help them through that application process. And it can feel cumbersome to someone who's not as familiar. And I know you all have done a lot of things. You've got an online system now, and I know you're moving pretty quickly through that. But I really appreciate that you're kind of figuring out ways to work with employers to streamline that process for their employees. I think that's a great opportunity that you've made yourself available for to help with.
Our certificate program is incredible. And we have LaRosa Parks handles a lot of our employer-sponsored childcare on the certificate side, and she is fabulous to work with. And she shares my passion for loving on our employers and loving on our community. So when she comes out there, she's like ready to go. She's engaging, like she's awesome.
That's fantastic. Did I miss, so we talked about the establishment grants, talked about the certificate program. Is there any other kind of resource offered that you would want, these applicants or ultimately the grantees, awardees to be thinking about tapping first,
To me, those are the big ones. The establishment grant is the big one, or if it's an expansion, that expansion grant. I don't think people
Okay,
are familiar with that, but yeah, you can do expansion grant too. And I mean, it can be an existing agency that's expanding, and a childcare provider is saying, or an employer is saying, if you expand, we can buy these 20 seats. So it can look like that too. It doesn't have to be a construction project, and it doesn't have to be a new employer. It can be an existing childcare agency expanding their capacity, increasing their capacity to support employer-sponsored childcare.
how does an agency, a lot of folks on the call already know this, but how does an agency access those grants, expansion grants? And the
Expansion
establishment
grants, they're going to need to let their licensing consultant know. And then we'll start the process, and it really is going to come down to what the space measures for. So once we know what the space is going to measure for, then we can, award those funds.
Got it. And those are $1,000 a slot too. Is that right?
Yes.
The expansion grants are also same as the establishment, $1,000 a slot, kind of one-time funds that can go towards materials and supplies.
Yes.
Furniture.
It's got to be under 50,000. So,
Okay.
And then there's some kind of caps around appliances too. Like I think you can't ask for more than 25% of your total to go towards appliances.
Got it. That's great. I think we have a question from Lori in the chat. Lori, did I get to this question? Or did we get to this question? Did you already ask this, or is this, you want to ask your question, Lori?
That's a new question.
Okay.
And it revolves around the voucher or certificate program. We primarily are serving teachers at our micro center. And if we expand with opening other micro centers at other locations, we're finding that the teachers do not meet the income requirements for any of the voucher programs in most cases, if they are a 2-parent household, but they do meet income requirements for need if you look at the free and reduced lunch schedule. So we have a sliding scale at the YMCA. Can the new care grant budget include subsidizing parent tuition payments if the parents don't qualify for voucher?
I don't think that it does, but let me do a quick double check. I think what I would do in that situation is say that the employer is helping pay for that and use that as your match. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . .
Claire, we
match.
also have
Oh, we
a
have another question.
question that, yeah, from Connie Casha
I've
about
got,
matching fund dollars.
oh, good, great. Yes, Connie, you want me to read it? Are you there to speak up?
Yes, sure. So, it says in the application, matching funds, but it doesn't say, is that dollar for dollar, or is it 50% matching funds of what you're requesting, or what does that ratio look like for matching funds?
I am writing that down and I'm gonna come back to you on that one, Connie. I apologize. I don't
Okay.
have the information.
No
All right,
problem.
that's what this is for.
And so I appreciate you sharing about access to other grants, because I started to ask it. I thought, no, that's really a dumb question, because most people don't let you double dip, is I guess what I would maybe think that would be. But so do we include, or would we include in our application our intent to request those funds from these other grant application opportunities? So like the expansion.
So the good thing about these is that it's not technically double dipping because it's two different pots of money.
Right.
So you're able to access that, which we love. We want anything that we can provide, we want to. I don't think it hurts to put in your grant application, like if you're asking for things, say you're asking for furniture because you hit your max on your establishment grant, I would just specify like, hey, I'm asking for these large pieces of furniture. I've applied for, I've maxed out my application for my establishment grant.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
It did for sure.
Okay, good deal.
And what does it say in that application about matching funds? Are we, and, anything you want to comment on about the match, Dana, that might be helpful? Like what can be used for match, for example? Can it be in kind? That's a lot of times in these nonprofit world. There's there's in kind matches, and then there's cash, investment
Yes.
matches.
Yes, it can be in kind. And I think that's specified in the grant that it can be in kind. So any of those things, make sure that, if they're providing consulting or anything like that in kind, any kind of in kind things, donate like a item donation, count that towards your match, because that is money that's coming from the employer, whether it's, hard cash or it's, work hours that they're paying for someone else to do.
Right. Yeah. Someone asked for the link to the grant application to be provided in the chat, and it's in there. In fact, Jasmine just put it back in there. Good. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Jasmine. Okay, so I've got this pulled up for if it can go to support, additional subsidy for, or helping subsidize the cost of childcare. And it looks like that would be more on the paying for slots piece of the employer and not something that we would necessarily be able to fund. I think that you could request it, but I don't know how that would go. So I'll take that one back too, Lori.
Perfect. That's great. I don't know who all we have on the call, and I see a lot of names and not sure about all of your organizations, but in fact, would love it if you all would go ahead and populate your names and organizations in the chat so we can capture that. Would love to do that. Actually, I think we already have that, don't we, Jonathan, from their Zoom registration? We probably do already. But I was just thinking about, those of you who have chambers of commerce in your network, your Bright Start networks, and as part of your groups, those would be seemingly natural partners to go and sort of explore this grant opportunity with them, let them know it's available, explore whether or not they're hearing from employers or they know of employers who are eager for solutions. We certainly hear that a ton from our chambers of commerce, that they are hearing it day in and day out from their employers, that they are desperately looking for childcare solutions and for help. So a lot of them just aren't sure what to do. And so would just encourage those of you who do have those folks in your sphere and in your network to reach out to your chambers and talk with them about it.
And I see that we have Sheila from Olive Tree on here. Sheila, do you want to, I talked about Renewal House. Do you want to give like a quick do you want to share what y'all are doing for childcare? Sorry to kind of take us off track, Blair. I just think that's such a cool
No, that's
example
great.
of agencies offering these wraparound services, and I got so excited to see that you're on here.
Hi, yes. So we are in Knoxville. We provide trauma responsive care, or high quality early education and wraparound care for mixed income families. We currently serve 69% of our families are low income. 48% of those families are single parent households. And we provide services from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Here in Knoxville. I'm happy to answer any questions specifically that you might have.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot. I've been putting everyone on the spot this week.
Is there, Sheila, it sounds really great and inspiring. Is there any, we talked about, you took the wraparound services. What type of wraparound services are you guys providing to your families?
Yes, so we have an on-site mobility mentor for our families to participate in through the United Way grant. So we have an on-site mobility mentor that are working with our families to get them over the threshold and into stability and financial independence. As well as we provide hot meals for our families. So we provide 2 hot breakfast, lunch, and snacks services for our families. And we have very low ratios compared to what the state mandates in our classrooms. We have 2 full-time teachers in each of our classrooms and supporting staff. Our center is uniquely set up with a leadership model where we have 3 directors that are on site full time. We have a director of curriculum and learning, a director of family and community partnerships, and a director of operations.
Awesome. Great. Well, kudos to you guys for your great work, your innovative work. Connie, do you have a hand up?
I do. I had another question.
Sure.
So this is for a 1 or 2 year time period. At the end of that grant period, are employers expected to continue to provide whatever financial support they're offering? What
think
does
it's gonna-
that look like?
It's going to be dependent on what they're offering. So if they're buying slots, the expectation is they're going to continue to buy slots. But if they're buying y'all a building, you know, the expectation is they've done their project and they've completed it. So it's just going to depend on the project. If you have a specific one in mind that you want to talk through what the long term could look like on that, I'm happy to, Connie.
I guess that it was just that question around if employers say they'll pay X amount for X number of employees, does that continue after the 2 year obligation or requirements?
The goal is to create sustainability with the grant. So my assumption would be yes, they would need to, that would need to go on beyond a year or 2 years.
Thank you.
Of course.
We've got a question in the chat from Caitlin about replicating the using the RFP to basically replicate the work in Clarksville.
That's right.
So, Caitlin, to answer your question, yes, you would need to know who the nonprofit childcare is going to be when you submit your application. But you've got time. It's not something that you have to do tomorrow. You've got time to do your RFP process and do what you need to do before submitting your application. But yeah, you will need to have the operator identified in your application.
Dana, I was wondering if there were any innovations you'd seen that sort of engaged family childcare providers. Wondering about, I was thinking about, I can't remember, there was the guy on your panel at the Economic Development Conference who was with a chamber and he was kind of supporting entrepreneurial, mostly women in engaging in, kind of sole proprietorship kind of thing, childcare, family childcare homes, and kind of supporting them. And I was thinking, how might that plug into this grant? Maybe then I think about, there's like the We Care model, like Dollywood has contracted with We Care, WEE Care, and they're kind of, We Care, I think, provides a service to Dollywood that is sort of, they're navigating, it's almost, they're helping identify family childcare providers for the employees of Dollywood. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud, is there a way to, that you've seen, that might fit this model that would involve family childcare?
So with the We Care model, we would need to contract with a licensed childcare provider. So We Care, you know how they do, they're kind of an umbrella. And all of all the providers that they contract with aren't licensed. So I think first and foremost, we've got to make sure that this is with license, which we weren't familiar with that either. We looked at We Care and we're like, okay, there's a lot of stuff happening here. So I think ours specifically would have to be with a licensed agency. We are seeing some really cool stuff happen when you're talking about Greg, the work he's done in Lewisburg and kind of his family childcare network. So we have a partnership with CCR&R, and they do our family and our group childcare network, and they've just renamed it. What do they call it? Just family and group childcare now. So it was Tennessee Family Childcare Network, and before that it was Top Stars. So now we have rebranded once again. But we have some communities that are doing kind of their own with some support. So we encourage that. A lot of these communities, like Cott County is a really good example. They're doing it. There's a lot of resistance to government in some of these communities. So we highly encourage those networks that happen outside of government and outside of our partners. I think that they could be a good way to spread the word about these grants, but I don't think that we would have a way to fund them directly.
Got it. Looks like Ella Weaver has a question. Ella?
Thanks, Blair. I had a question, Dana, kind of back in the very beginning, you referenced, for example, Not a United Way. So then when you think about like the Clarksville model, and then even going back to Caitlin's question, so who is the applicant in that scenario?
For the Clarksville project?
Yeah, or even just replicating that project for this grant purpose.
Sure. So they just full disclosure, we haven't given them any kind of money. So the way that they did their project was the IDB, their Industrial Development Board, put out an RFP, and then the childcare provider responded to the Industrial Development Board's RFP.
So if we were, let's say we wanted to try to do that in Rutherford County. And I'm with United Way, I should have specified that. So if we were going to put out an RFP and identify a nonprofit and partner with our industrial park or a network of employers, would United Way be a qualified applicant with an identified childcare provider or no?
Would you be the employer that it's benefiting?
No, although I'd love, I could send my kids there too, I suppose.
So it would need to be the employers on that applying with the childcare agency, but you can help. The United Way can help. Like there's no rule that says your grant writer cannot help them put this together, but it would the actual money
applicant
to the the applicant.
Applicant would be the nonprofits and the employers.
Yes, and the money will go directly to the nonprofit.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But there is nothing saying you can't use your grant writing skills. I think that that's incredible to have that resource available to these providers, because we have a lot of them that are wonderful but don't have that skill set.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Dana, I just put a link in the chat to a new kind of startup organization called On-Site Kids, and they do kind of a turnkey approach. You could do the modular sites where they build modular sites in parking lots and things like that, and work through the licensing process. And then they also do a full turnkey thing where they can come in and actually recruit the folks as well. I'm curious, obviously you have to line up the partnerships right with the employer and the nonprofit, but would funds be eligible for something like this?
Yeah, I would think so, if it meets the parameters of the employer, the nonprofit, and then having some sort of match. So I don't think we could come in and like buy the unit if,
Sure.
But I think we could say the employer buys the unit. We could look at some other ways to support or to do some funding on stuff like that. So yeah, no, I love that. I think it's cool. And Blair was telling us about kind of these really cool, like small type of things. I think they're awesome. I'm like, can I put one outside? Like, I think those are fabulous. So yeah, absolutely.
Put them in your parking lot at your church. Or
Yeah.
Exactly. That's great. Well, so actually, if I can dig into that just a minute more, so Dana, just playing devil's advocate, if money could go towards capital costs to build buildings, you don't think that it could also just buy the modular unit? Kind of
I
the
think
same thing.
I think it could. I think it's just how do you have the employer match to show that they've put in the same amount
Got
of
it.
money buying. So yeah, if
Got
they're,
it.
say they buy one and they want us to buy another one, maybe that's what it looks like.
Maybe that's it. Got it.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
have to make sure that there's a, there's a match that meets that. And for me, I'm having a hard time seeing what the match would, like what they would do to make the match kind of. But yeah, if they're, hey, if they're doing it, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Jonathan, we'll share, well, you put that in the chat, the on-site kids for folks to know. This is something we stumbled upon recently, got introduced to. This is, I'd never, when I hear modular, I'm like, that's going to be, a yucky, unpleasant place to be, a little modular classroom, but actually they're like these glorious, beautiful spaces. And, there's this entrepreneur who's had these manufactured and you can get them and put them anywhere and they're lovely. So
I think it's awesome. The ability to put them where you need them and get rid of so much of that overhead, that's phenomenal.
yes, it is. It really is. So, well, anything, oh, here's one. Are funds all allocated all at once or as they are spent?
Connie, that's a good question. I'm going to check with Jason on that one because I'm not sure how that goes. That one's a little bit above me.
Got it.
That's a really good question. You guys are really helping us build out FAQ. I appreciate that.
Here's a question from Jenny White on our team at TQE. Blair, on what you said about putting in your church parking lot, if a church wanted to open a facility in their church facility, could this apply?
Yes, if there's an employer involved, and then if the church, whoever's running it has to be a nonprofit. So if the church is the nonprofit that's running it and they're supporting an employer, yep. Or if the church is the employer, that also works.
Right. And the provider will have to be a DHS licensed provider.
Yes, yes, absolutely. But our churches are incredible. We have so many licensed churches, and I really want to see more of that happening because they just provide such a good service to community. So yeah, absolutely. As long as it's licensed, we can get our pre-licensure unit in there and help license you and give you some money. So
Awesome. Any other thoughts, questions for Dana? Or any ideas anyone wants to share? Okay. Looks like we have come to the end of our questions. Jonathan, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Wanted to take 60 seconds, fill that out for us. It helps us to make these lunch and learns more relevant to you. So how we can make these things better, what topics we might need to cover in the future, and how we're doing on these lunch and learns. So look forward to coming to you with more and more useful information as we hear your feedback on this. But appreciate everything that you all are doing, and look forward to seeing some great, just fantastic success stories when you all.
Yeah, that's right. Looks like we're losing Jonathan, but to answer your questions, yes, we will give all of this. There's some notes that'll be provided. We'll provide the recording back to you, and we'll get the questions answered, Dana's questions that she's going to take back to her team and get some feedback on. So all that'll come back out to you in email form, hopefully, certainly by the end of the week. And that is tomorrow, isn't it? So tomorrow or the end of the week. Monday at the latest.
and I will
And do go ahead. Jonathan was trying to say, he was a little losing his connection there, but he was trying to say there is a form and a chat evaluation form. If you'll just scroll up about 6 comments there and see it in the chat, there's a link. Just it takes 2 minutes. Just fill it out to help us know if we're meeting your needs and making these as helpful and useful as they can be. Dana, you have been amazing. You are amazing. You do great work. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today and making yourself available as a resource to all these amazing people who are, hoping to support their communities in progress and on the childcare front. So with that, everybody, I hope you have a great day and a lovely Easter weekend if you celebrate it. And yeah, I think that's a wrap. Thanks all.